SX shop and SX workers at Reddit. What are some of the best examples or clients not knowing how anatomy SX works? Close enough. So my friend works as a pharmacist and says a guy came in once looking to purchase Plan B the morning after pill. He then asked her to explain when he should ingest it because he planned to have unprotected SX that night. First one that comes to mind is having to explain to a gentleman that the reason his wife doesn't enjoy toys probably has something to do with the fact he was cleaning them with Clorox wipes beforehand. And numerous explanations that nail beads are not ripcords and your partner likely isn't a lawnmower. BEYBLADES. I dunno if this counts. But I once had a gay man call and explain that after having an LSX, his butt started feeling weird and said he thought he could feel worms moving around and legitimately wanted to know what to do. Doctor here. If he had a worm infestation, it is strange to become symptomatic all of a sudden after an LSX. And he would have noticed something during bowel movements. It is far more probable that the SX irritated his hemorrhoid veins and what he was feeling was the pulse of blood going through congested and inflamed tissue. Not native speaker, so I may have used some wrong terms. Not me. But I used to date a woman who worked at a SX shop. Every single day she would come home and rant about having had to desperately dissuade someone from doing something to their own arsehole that would put them in the hospital. Edit. I cannot stress this enough. Flared bases. Please. Do it for your doctor. More one guy who didn't understand that bestiality was illegal and therefore we didn't have any PRN featuring donkeys. Otherwise many male customers who didn't understand the difference between SX worker and SX shop worker. I once spent 20 minutes desperately trying to get a guy to buy enough lube after he told me that his girlfriend insisted that he get some. Because his initial attempt was him spitting on his dick and shoving it in her ass. I'm a salesperson. But I'm just being kind when I tell people to buy more than they think they need. He blew off my advice and bought a $1 foil packet of lube. My butthole clenched so damn hard just then. Who the thinks a bit of spit will be fine for a hole that doesn't self-lubricate or stretch easily? I had a dude ask me if a certain toy was for vaginal use or for the uterus because he thought it was two different holes. Client was a middle-aged, married man. Kept hassling for no condom and I kept refusing. He asked why I wouldn't do it because surely I'm on a tablet to stop myself getting pregnant. I explained that condoms were important in protecting against STDs. He literally did now know what an STD was. I spent a while explaining to him and he started to worry that his wife would find out he was seeing SX workers because he hadn't been using condoms. He said, so if I catch something, my wife could get it too? That's actually pretty scary. I'd hate to be his wife. My friend is a SX worker. She asked me if it was normal to have a ching and like green discharge down there. She actually didn't know STDs existed but had like heard of AIDS. In the shop I work at I get a lot of women who are curious about Kegel Benwa balls but wonder what happens if they get lost in their vagina. I always gently explain that well that's not possible. Or at least highly unlikely. There's always questions about anatomy. But we just do our best to inform people. I worked at a local SX shop last summer. Women always asked help from me because the only other person working was a guy. They wanted some SX toy but didn't know exactly what. I would usually ask something along the lines of what makes you come easier. Clitoral stimulation or something inserted in you? Full stop. I was there only for 2 weeks and during those 2 weeks, at least 7 women said oh. I've never had an orgasm so I don't know. Most of them were women under 25 but the oldest was around 35-40 and married. That poor woman. Many people who come into my shop are under the impression that if it can go in the vagina, it's also intended good for an use. The list includes Benwa balls, massive dildos, and a Vibe chorus, a toy that's made to kinda clip onto the vagina by having one side against the vulva and one that goes inside and presses against the vaginal wall. Bonus round. An older woman came in once who was appalled at everything in the store. Went to the dildos and loudly asked, what are these even for? Mom. Come on. Come on. Mom? Come on. I worked at a sex shop for like 3 years and the thing that irked me the most were people who were willfully ignorant about lube. Even after I'd explain why it's good for you, they'd be like, nah, that's for old ladies. For either anal or vaginal sex, it's there to reduce friction and make it more comfortable, safe. Many men and women have this misconception that if a woman cannot produce enough moisture on her own, then there's something seriously wrong with her. It's actually very common for women of all ages to use lubricant from time to time. Either because they are nervous and inexperienced, having very rough sex, or because their bodies simply don't produce that much. It would hurt me to think of all the women, especially inexperienced ones, getting their canals just dying shredded because men or other women are shaming them for needing lube. Working there taught me that a surprising amount of people are very stupid, selfish lovers. Be careful out there, folks. It was phone sex. But the guy in. Full stop. Full stop. I spent 3 hours describing to him how a girl would pee in the woods. Whether he knew or not is beside the point. 3 hours describing it while trying to be horny at the same time. Dudes are wild sometimes. Squatting. Not that difficult of a concept. Yeah, baby. Tell me again how aggressively you angled the knees on descent. Oh yeah. Okay. Now do you have to pee? Good. Now make sure you're facing north and looking at the cabin. Okay. Are you squatting and you have to pee? Okay. Now what angle are your knees at? I had a guy who wanted to meet up for full service, but said he didn't want me to be disappointed by how small his dick was. He said, "Don't worry though, I'll bring a banana for us to use so you'll still be satisfied?" Keeping your potassium levels up is important. When I worked in a sex shop, lots of guys would come in looking for a gift for their female S. I would often ask them if they were looking for a toy with clitoral or G-spot stimulation. The number of guys who looked at me blankly and went, "What is clitoral? I just want something to put in her," or a version of that statement, never failed to surprise me. I have one in reverse. I went into a sex shop in a gay area of Sydney. I explained to the guy that I hadn't really used a DLDO before, I'm a guy, and he suggested a rabbit DLDO. I told him I don't have a clitoris that needs stimulating and he just went silent and didn't suggest any more dildos. I could understand him thinking it was for a girlfriend, but I was in a gay area and explained to him it was for me. I have a regular client who keeps asking me to finger my urethra. I've never even done sounding. That's not something people just do. No prep. I don't want a vibrator. Those loosen your vagina. Sometimes I got people who didn't want an L toys because they had that fear. Which isn't true, BTW, the muscles just are conditioned to relax more. But this was a mother coming in and saying this: "If you can shoot a child out of you and go back to having a normal vagina in 6-8 weeks, then a vibrator isn't gonna loosen anything." It's crazy to me how many women still think their vagina is gonna get loose if they have sex with a lot of partners or use toys or whatever. Edit. Never worked there, but when I was 16 I worked next door to one. I was outside most of the day loading mulch, and around noon every day I would see 5 to 6 white collar workers walk in for 5-10 minutes and walk out with nothing. Time went by and when I turned 18 found out they were spanking it in the DVD testing room. Adult store employee here. It's mostly men not realizing the difference between a standard butt plug and a prostate massager. Coming up with a prostate massager and asking if it's a good plug for their girl. And me explaining how it's for biological men and then having to explain further how they themselves have a P-spot in their ass. Also, with dongs and some rabbit style vibrators. The material is a non-body safe, TPE-TPR. It is porous and holds bacteria which can cause infections and is recommended use with a condom. Seriously, please invest in high quality toys. I know money is tight sometimes, but you shouldn't risk your health for an orgasm. It isn't worth it. You would be astonished the amount of men that are convinced that dick enlargement cream exists. Then you have to spend half an hour explaining how biology actually works. And that they aren't going to find a magical cream to make them 10 inches like the internet tells them. Then they tell you a friend has some and you want it. And you just look into the CCTV camera like on The Office as you try not to smash your face against the counter in utter disbelief at people's idiocy. Dom sex worker, formerly. I was hired by couples twice. And on both occasions I was basically there to be their weird naked instructor on how to spice up their sex life. When in reality, their marriages were probably failing due to other reasons and I was some fantastical attempt to save it. Which brings me to the time an adult woman asked me, a very depressed lesbian, to show her how to stimulate her husband's prostate. Well, it was common to ask guys buying stuff for their girlfriends if their girl was a clit, G-spot, or both kind of girl. Most of the time they didn't know. Are clit girls in the majority? Edit. Thanks for all the replies saying to ask her. I'm a woman and I know what gets me off. I'm more curious if someone who works at a sex shop sells more clit toys or G-spot toys. Customers firmly placing their thumb above my pubic bone. Not moving it. Watching me have literally no reaction. I forgot that this post was also asking for sex workers to comment and I thought you meant a sex shop customer and I was like Jesus Christ. Online sex worker here. It's crazy how many men assume all women can. Sex shop worker here. I answered a call from a man who had purchased a sounding device. It goes in your urethra if you didn't know. He couldn't get it out. I asked him if he'd used lube and he told me no and that it was starting to hurt. He asked if he should yank it. I just had to tell him to contact his doctor. This is from my sibling. She had to explain the basics to a couple who were waiting until marriage and had just gotten married. They weren't well educated the practice. Sister ran over all the basic options for them to try out. I hope it worked out well for them. Edit. Retail worker. BTW. I used to work in a sex shop. The amount of people that didn't know that latex condoms break down when using oil-based lube is astounding. Had to explain it multiple times a day. Pro tip. If you don't know what lube to use for something. One more. I had a daytime regular named Terry. This was 20 years ago. But I'll never forget this old guy's name. He would stop by for 10 minutes. Grab a VHS from the bargain bin and attempt to flirt with me while checking out. One day I noticed Terry is in the male enhancement section and he's been there a minute. I wander back and ask if he has questions. He is holding a penis pump and very seriously asks if I could handle something that big. I laughed out loud. That usually shut down any advances. But Terry kept at it. He told me there were obviously women who could handle it or we wouldn't sell them. And Terry told me that his dick no longer got hard. But if he were able to keep suction on it while he put the toy himself inside of vagina, that just might work. He never came back into the store after his purchase that day, or so maybe it worked. Or maybe some woman killed him for trying to shove a penis pump inside her. So when I was like 15 I was in a knife smoke sex shop and some dude was in the sex part of the shop and he was buying a DLDO and kept asking if it was long enough to reach his girlfriend's clit and how deep inside a woman is her clit, and I was like, honey, how are you 30 something years old not knowing what a clit is? Sex worker here. The amount of clients who ask me how many times I came from some thirsty jackhammering for 2 minutes are laughable. Baby. If I came you would definitely know it. I have an anatomically correct dong bong. I posted a cheeky video of myself using it on my Snapchat. A gentleman messaged me to register his disappointment that I had not used my vagina to smoke from it. I'm still not sure if he was joking or not. I was honestly too scared to ask. I managed PRN stores to get myself through college. One of the girls I felt most sorry for was a chubby girl, no hate here, who said no one would go down on her and she wanted to know what oral sex was like. I pointed her to a lil pink butterfly toy that had battery operated suction. I gave her a handful of free lube samples to go with it and wished her luck. She came back to the store later that same night. Toy in the bag I sent it home in. She was upset and wanted a refund because she said the butterfly was very uncomfortable. I quickly told her all sales final. And then asked questions. So, the girl had inserted the hard plastic butterfly suction side in. She had no idea that she had a clitoris above her vaginal opening that could bring her to orgasm. I sent her on her way with some education and more lube samples. I didn't see her again thou susso. Let's call that a win. When I did full service SX work, I had more than one guy ask me if I had come from giving oral. I prefer not to lie, so I would say no. The response ranged from a disappointed oh to an angry why not. There are so many other horror stories, but that's probably the most amusing recurring problem. One of my clients thought the condom was for pee. A friend of mine is a doctor. I'm not entirely sure what her previous role was, but she would basically help people with sex related difficulties. One day she was helping a couple who had been unsuccessfully trying for a baby. She got them to describe what steps they normally took, and the man ended up explaining how he would come into her belly button. I saw a reply to another comment saying, I hope that there's a better button comment here somewhere. We found it. Former SX shop employee. A man bought some L beads. I explained due to the nature there are no refunds etc. He got it. Nothing unusual, a normal purchase. Maybe 2 hours later I get a phone call. Hello, shop name. Yes, hi, I was in there not too long ago and I purchased some L beads. Okay. I was wondering how to remove them. Oh, there is a handle on one end. Sir. It looks like a ring. Oh. We inserted that end first. Well then you'll likely have to go to the emergency. Can't you come here and help us? No sir. Okay. Bye. NSFW. If I had a nickel for every time someone said oh baby. Now squirt for me while he roughly pounds his fingers in and out of me. Dude. I don't squirt and I'm nowhere near close to an orgasm with your terrible fingering skills. I used to be a professional dominatrix. But this particular story has nothing to do with sex or sexual anatomy at all. My nose and lip are pierced and one of my clients thought that I could breathe through the piercings if I took the rings out. My piercings are not gauged. They're just regular 18/20G piercings. Yeah. No my friend. I cannot in fact breathe through a hole the size of a mechanical pencil lead. On the sexual anatomy side, the number of grown-ass men who didn't know that most women's boobs are slightly uneven sizes was way too damn high. And so the great or bad women's anatomy harvest begins. I hosted a final year film class documentary about different aspects of pleasure, BDSM play between couples from a sub's perspective, taboos surrounding sex and use of the industry from a socio-psychological standpoint, internalized shame etc. And while we were in a sex shop I did a wander with a woman who worked there and made a comment about how a 30cm/12 horse DLDO was optimistic. Or for someone with a death wish. Very professionally. She explained training and dilation kits. And how conversations with customers really opened her eyes in terms of what people get off on. The documentary itself wasn't anything special. But I learned a lot and discovered that it was a dick move, yike, to shame other people's kinks. Even inadvertently. I'm a camgirl of 6 years. I've been asked if I worry about being stretched out. And had to explain that's not really a thing. I was asked to lactate. A guy genuinely thought all women could lactate on demand. An L. Oh my god. Straight men don't understand an L. When I tell them I have to prep they genuinely are confused. You'd be surprised how many men believe women will come on demand. Or come within 3 minutes of stimulation. My biggest pet peeve is when guys get mad at me for using lube. 1. A wet vagina doesn't mean it is aroused. 2. A dry vagina doesn't mean it's not aroused. 3. Silicone toys are extra harsh on the skin and dry you out. The cervix when touched hurts. It hurts. Pain. Painful. IT does not feel good to have your cervix slammed into. IT is not an accomplishment. If a girl pulls away because you are slamming into her cervix, I'm stop. Not at a sex shop, but working as a pharmacist, you see some woman was eating vaginal thrush cream instead of applying it because, well, nobody told her, and also she was insane. Guys and girls using lignocaine, a powerful numbing agent, to last longer during sex. Kinda okay at low dose on the penis under a condom. Less okay poured liberally into the vagina. Woman who lied about having a colonoscopy because she was nervous about being clean for her first LSX, had ingested a full picker prep kit. The older, angrier cousin of laxatives. Imagine sticking a garden hose down your throat and waiting. Men requesting large tampons on behalf of their partners in some weird simile to large condoms. Not really bad anatomy, but had a woman ask about whether a medicine would go into her breast milk. Not because she was breastfeeding an infant, but rather she and her partner engaged in erotic lactation. OP has crafted a very clever way to find out how anatomy SX works. Had a tiny ass Asian chick come in and buy the Great American Challenge. Because she said, and I quote, "My PSSY stretches. I can take a 9-inch dick. I can handle this. Now this thing is 15 long and 3 wide and a 9 girth." 3 days later she comes back trying to return it, saying that she hurt herself trying to use it. Needless to say, the owner declined the return. And after this, chick decided she was going to start getting an attitude and throw it at me. She ended up arrested for assault and trespass from the shop. Still doesn't hold a candle to when I DJ'd at a swingers BDSM club and seen an old, 80-plus-year-old woman leading a pack of like 10 guys all in their 20s 30s around on leashes and getting a train ran on her right on the dance floor. That thing's too big. You don't want to ruin your PSSY. Whenever a couple goes shopping for dildos, either the guy thinks vaginas are like car tires and loose tread, or he's upset she's getting something bigger than him. Most men don't know how to thrust into a woman's vagina, but they all know how to jackhammer it. Client who was convinced that rubbing alcohol was interchangeable with lube. The number of times we get a guy in that will buy the cheapest nastiest toy because it'll do, or she doesn't care. I promise you she does, mate. I don't work at a shop, but the question reminded me of a stand-up show I went to. The comedian on stage worked at a sex shop and had tons of great stories. Repeat folks in the PRNO area pretending they totally aren't there every week. People being really confused at how revealing the Halloween costumes are, and it's not even October. A variety of things. For ref, I'm a lesbian, and I was pretty sheltered growing up as I was raised by my grandmother. I'm pretty caught up to the real world, but sometimes a thing will happen where it's very clear I was sheltered. So, comedian on stage brings up a recurring customer they referred to as Coke Can. Apparently he wore tight jeans. I'm waiting for the link to Coca-Cola cans. She gets to the end of her story, and I turn to my so and say, "She didn't even tell us why he was called Coke Can." My so insists this was funnier than the story itself, and it still took me a few seconds processing to understand. Former SX worker here. I had a younger guy, mid-20s. Just want to look and poke around my lady parts. He asked questions. It was much more clinical than SZL. I felt bad for him at first, but it was much more awkward than my usual inexperienced guys. The thought crossed my mind that he could have been a serial killer in training or something. Never saw him again. I've been reading the majority of the comments here. As a man, I'm so embarrassed. How does the level of misinformation and just general lack of knowledge or understanding get so high? SX shop worker here. The amount of men that believe a rhino or wicked performance pill will magically fix your coke dick is astonishing. I'm sorry, chief. Columbia owns the dick for the night. Edit. I worked at a SX shop for about a month. I was trying to help a customer get a toy for his girlfriend when he asserted that the clitoris is just a myth to make men feel incompetent. I tried to help but he insisted. Cam girl for 9 years-ish. My biggest annoyance was always guys who thought an L was not only on demand but something literally all cam girls offered. They never understood you had to prep at all. After my green years were over I stopped doing things I genuinely didn't enjoy. That either garnered respect or hate depending on the person. This included an L for a long time. When I came back after a long hiatus I made it clear an L was off the table. Some guys really couldn't wrap their head around the idea cam girls would refuse them in any way if they dangled their pennies in her face. I would explain how if they really wanted it that bad they would have to wait for me train myself back up. I hadn't had anything larger than a finger up there in forever. I wasn't about to go straight to launching a 9-inch DLDO up there and risk ripping my arsehole for some chump offering me pocket change.